Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's Planning Applications Committee meeting on the 19th of September 2023. I shall start with the Chair's welcome and evacuation address. So, can I ask that you ensure that everyone is signed in on the sign-in sheets provided? These will be used in case of an evacuation. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Lloyds Bank building on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded for future publication on the Council's website. Please can I ask that you turn your mobile phones off or at the very least ensure they are set to silent. Okay, announcements. So I've made this announcement for the last few meetings. I'm going to keep on making it. So please can I ask members of the Planning Applications Committee, speakers and members of the general public who are joining us in the public gallery, just to remember, please, the standards that we expect in terms of behaviour. We do understand that planning can be quite an emotional issue and we all want the best possible outcomes, but we do need to sort of follow the procedure, and we do need to remember at the end of the day we are all human beings and we need to treat one another with courtesy and respect. So please can we make sure that we have a big push on that in terms of when we are speaking to one another, that we're not being sort of overly aggressive. And nobody minds a bit of robust questioning members of the Planning Application Committee, but what we don't want to see is it verging on rudeness, please. So can we please just think about how we phrase things and how we address people. And again, from members of the public, I will not be putting up with shouting out from a public gallery. Everyone has had the opportunity to either submit things in writing or to ask to be a speaker at tonight's event. So if you are in the public gallery, please remember, and I know it can be difficult, that you are here to sort of observe proceedings and not to sort of necessarily join in those proceedings. Okay, item number 2, apologies. I have one apology, and that's from Councillor Hartshorn, and he's been substituted tonight by Councillor Harbison. So thank you, Councillor Harbison, for joining us this evening. Item 3, the minutes from the previous meeting on the 29th of August. Is there any reason why I can't sign them off from any of the members who attended the last meeting? Right, I'm not seeing any objections or issues, so I shall sign those minutes off. Thank you very much. Item number 4, declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest not included on the schedule as printed? So I'll go around from my left. Councillor Green.
Currently being updated, but will be ready for when the document of minutes is produced after this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
To this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to applications number 3 and 4, they do relate to my portfolio as a cabinet member. But I've only overseen the policy, not the actual assessment of the planning application against the planning criteria, etc., and will be making a decision based on the information given to me by the planning officers and weigh that up accordingly. And also at the same time, Chair, can I just say in terms of declaration of contact, save me time, I have been contacted by numerous residents in relation to the Osprey Close application as a local ward member. I haven't given any indication as to how I intend to speak or vote tonight, and I've advised them accordingly. Thank you.
Declarations of contact then. I know we've all received something from for item number 1 from the applicant, so we have received that. I think we've all got that letter, so I'll make that declaration on everyone's behalf. Are there any other declarations of contact other than one that Councillor Wilson has just made on item 1? No? Okay, so... Oh, sorry, Councillor Green, my apologies.
I happened to speak to a friend of mine in the car park who happens to be here from Osprey Close, but we didn't speak anything related to this item.
Yeah. In that case, then, we'll move on to our Sorry, am I missing all these hands up? Sorry, Councillor Cape, my apologies.
The contact that we had from GMI, I did find it rather confusing that one of the rationales given for the non-attendance was a perception of danger.
I mean, whether you've had any further contact, that's all I need to know for this point. Thank you.
When can I raise it then?
I mean, is it? I mean, all I can say is, if you feel that it's pertinent, what you have to say on that, then I would raise it when we discuss the matter.
Fine.
But you've got to ask yourself a question: is it pertinent?
It is.
It just background knowledge or information? No. So that's down to you. Okay. So right, I'm going to ask: are there any other declarations that I need to be aware of? If you could turn your microphone on, please, Councillor Cape. Thank you. So I'm not seeing anyone else having their hand up, so I should go to Karina, who's going to be doing our presenting tonight. So whenever you're ready, if you'd like to start with the first item.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, item 1 seeks planning permission for the change of use of 2 Osprey Close, Nuneaton, from a residential dwelling, use class C3, to a children's care home, use class C2. The application was heard at Planning Applications Committee on the 25th of July 2023, where members resolved to defer the determination of the application to allow for a site visit to be carried out and to allow for parking concerns to be assessed further by the County Highway Authority. Got some technical issues, Chris? If you could help,
while
please.
you're waiting to resolve those technical issues, I've seen Councillor Guttridge waving his hand. So I will just remind members of the photograph that we saw on the first slide of the front of the house. That's not actually what it looks like, and those of us who went out on the site visit will appreciate the driveway doesn't look as elongated as it appears in there. So I will just draw everyone's attention to that fact, that it does not look like that.
Have we got any IT assistance at all? It's not flicking through the slides.
Just try unplugging the mouse and back in again.
This. Unplug that.
You using this?
No, this.
Try use the mouse.
I think I've got to unplug that, haven't I, from the actual main thing. That's the charger. Yeah, probably. Let me just have a look. Where's Chris? You're right to try and get this moving, Chris. Oh, hold on. Yeah, that's not connected. It's working now. Okay. Apologies about that. I think we're sorted now. Right, okay, just to continue then. The key issues to consider in the assessment of this application are the principle of development, residential amenity impacts, and highway safety and parking impacts. The site is located in Whitestone in the southeast of Nuneaton and within an established residential estate within the defined settlement boundary. The existing property is a 5-bedroom detached dwelling with 3 bathrooms, a downstairs toilet, a lounge, dining room, family room, kitchen, attached garage and utility with a rear garden. The children's home would provide care for up to 3 children. As part of the change of use, 4 bedrooms are to be retained, 3 for the children and 1 as a staff bedroom. One of the existing bedrooms would be used as a staff office. It should be noted that none of these internal alterations require planning permission. The property also features an existing paved front driveway, which is suitable for the parking of 2 vehicles. Pages 17 and 19 of the agenda discuss the principle of development in detail. Policy H1 of the Borough Plan 2019 states that development proposals for specialised housing will be approved where a local need can be demonstrated. Warwickshire County Council have stated that there is a need for children's home placements in the county and specifically within Nuneaton. Whilst a number of objections have stated that children's homes are commercial uses and should not be located within residential areas, it should be noted that use class C2 is an umbrella use class category for residential institutions. As such, the application relates to a use for the provision of residential accommodation and care to people in need of care, which is an appropriate use to be located within an established residential area. It is considered that residential estates are the most appropriate locations for small children's homes and would ensure that looked after children are not ostracised from society and can benefit from the same access to local schools, parks and facilities that any other child would. The site is located within a sustainable location in close proximity to nurseries, primary and secondary schools, bus stops, shops and parks. As such, the site is considered to be an acceptable location for a small-scale children's home. The written ministerial statement published in May 2023 is an important material consideration in the assessment of this application, which should not be disregarded. The statement sets out the government's commitment to support the development of accommodation for looked after children and its delivery through the planning system. The document also states that the planning system should not be a barrier to providing homes for the most vulnerable children in our society. When care is the best choice for a child, it is important that the care system provides stable, loving homes to children and communities. With regard to residential amenity impacts of the scheme, the proposed use would function very much like a typical family home. Noise and disturbance associated with the comings and goings would not be disproportionately or significantly above what could reasonably be expected to be generated by the existing 5-bedroom dwelling, which would become a 4-bedroom property as a result of the proposal. Any noise arising from the property would be unlikely to be significantly excessive in terms of levels, and it should be noted that the Council's environmental health team have no objection to the application. In addition, recommended condition 4 would ensure that the property would not be capable of being used for any other uses falling in within use class C2, which could have harmful impacts upon the amenities of the area. Condition 3 would also ensure that no more than 3 residents could be cared for within the dwelling at any one time. Overall, the residential amenity impacts of the scheme are considered to be acceptable. 1 car parking space would be required for the 3 residents and 2 spaces for the total number of staff on site at any one time, that being 3 carers and 1 manager. Therefore, a total of 3 car parking spaces are required in order to meet the Council's SPD standards. Following the application being deferred, a revised site plan has been submitted showing 4 parking spaces provided on the site. This includes 1 in the existing garage and 1 sideways on the drive, along with 2 existing spaces provided. The space within the garage cannot be considered as compliant car parking provision, given the substandard internal dimensions of the existing garage. Additionally, the space provided on the block pave area of the site frontage would be blocked in by 2 of the spaces provided to the remainder of the driveway. It is therefore likely that the vehicle would park perpendicular to the house, overhanging into the highway. Overall, the scheme would be substandard by 1 parking space, and it is unlikely that 1 additional vehicle being parked on the street would be detrimental to highway safety. The County Highway Authority have stated that demand for on-street parking does not appear to be high and that there are spaces available on street within acceptable walking distances. No objection to the application has been raised by the County Highway Authority, as the proposal is not considered to be detrimentally affect the public highway. Page 22 of the committee report provides a conclusion of the assessment of the application. On balance, whilst there have been multiple objections to the scheme, it is considered that there are no reasonable grounds for refusal and there would be in principle support for the scheme and no unacceptable impacts arising as a result of the change of use. It is therefore recommended that planning permission is granted, subject to the imposition of conditions as printed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Karina. I have several speakers on this matter, 2 objectors and a ward councillor. So I'll start with the 2 objectors first. I'll go with Mr. Bowers first, and then I'll move to yourself, Mr. Coley, and then you can summarise, Councillor Guttridge, your thoughts. So you have your 3 minutes when you are ready.
Thank you. You've now seen our close. You have witnessed the narrow areas and the unlit pathways. You've also seen the narrowness of the width of the entrance to the close in the area outside number 2. you cannot fail to see the risk and danger that poor and dangerous parking could bring in an emergency. To further review on car parking, as already has been stated, the only available parking is on Gorse Farm Road. That is an overused cut-through which is people speed along. Parking on this road is not safe, and there is no other way to describe this. Further, and a key significant requirement of this application is to have local and community support. This application does not have that support. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We as a community have raised multiple issues in our objections, and these objections have been in the main ignored or bundled into categories that allegedly are not of interest to the planners. There are also matters raised to planning on September the 7th that have not been responded to in regard to the process that has been played out here regarding this application. I find it extremely disappointing that a professional body such as this have failed and chosen not to respond. Members of the committee, you have an obligation to make a decision to this application. Please let me remind you that the applicant has now moved out of the area, living at over 30 miles from the property, a property that he is now renting out, and a property that until 4:30 this afternoon looked very derelict and dirty. The applicant has identified a process with very little outlay and minimal engagement for personal profit. This is profiteering from a very group of people that he has tried to convince you that he cares for. The only thing that this applicant appears to care for is the selfish manipulation of personal profit. Be in no doubt that this is what you are voting for if you vote yes to this application. You are elected to council to represent the interests of your community, to represent the interests of those who put you in these positions. The facts of this matter are, there is no visible need for this premises in Nuneaton today. There are no local amenities to support this application. There is an applicant who has reduced and changed his application at every term to the women demand of this process, reducing security, responsibility and increasing risk and maximising his own benefit. There is a significant risk to those living in and around the property because, and please have no doubt, whatever contingencies you place on the parking will be ignored. The applicant has used emotional language and behaviour throughout this process, focusing on a laughable definition of family. This living arrangement will never be viewed as a family unit. Anyone with a sense of understanding of family will see straight through it. It is simply preposterous to suggest this to be an accurate view of family. In addition, bringing a GP to represent his argument at his first meeting, this GP also happens to be a director of a care company. I'm sure you can do the maths on that particular point. You are more concerned about the impact of rejecting this application, the potential of an appeal and the cost of that on the council. If this is why this is this is accepted, then I'm afraid this cannot be a fair process. In closing, members of this committee, you have a responsibility to vote. A vote in favour of the application is a vote that gives the green light to individual profiteering, and in this case, an individual profiteering from the very individuals he alleges to care about, and an individual who holds favour from a location outside of your jurisdiction. A vote in rejection of this application gives hope to everyone who is put in the position of our community that there is a fair and reasonable process that puts the interests of those living in the community first and foremost. It's the last sentence, sir, for their decision. Thank you.
Does anyone have any points of clarification they wish to seek? No? Okay, in that case, we'll go to Mr. Coley, who's our second speaker.
Members of the committee, the facts are as follows. One man has decided to change his house into a children's home to make a profit from taxpayers' money without any consideration to his neighbours, where most of them are elderly, without any concern of the stress and anxiety this will cause. This was not instigated by the Warwickshire County Council. The plans for the home are basic and do not actually confirm how the home will be used. The staffing levels proposed are 2 carers, a manager, a deputy manager, with extra staff if required. Parking is the key problem to this development. The owner block paved over the front of his property, including part of the highway, to increase his parking area without highway's permission. Planning have now confirmed that only 2 parking spaces can be counted. This goes against the recommendation of the SPD standards that the property should have at least 3 parking spaces. If this was enforced, this would make the property unsuitable. However, planning have decided to ignore this. So with the 2 cars on the drive, this means the cars for the manager and deputy manager will have to park elsewhere. Wherever these cars park, it will be from 9 till 5 days a week. Parking will also be required for the staff changeover, social workers, visitors and other support workers, and more carers if needed. The committee would have observed that there is no street parking in Osprey Close. It has no pavements and parking on the road would be hazardous for residents, and access for emergency vehicles due to it being so narrow. Parking in the attached Gorse Farm Road, which is used as a shortcut by lots of people, is not practical. It was not designed for parking as the road is narrow and has numerous drives, 6 junctions, 3 slip roads and a bend. Most cars that do park go on the pavement, which is hazardous to wheelchairs, mobility users and pushchairs. If cars park on the road, this can cause blind spots, which is another hazard. According to the recommendations of the Highway Code, you should not park within 10 metres of a junction, block people's drives, park near or on a bend or on the pavement. This is to ensure everyone's safety. If this was applied, it would make safe parking impossible. Once again, this seems to be ignored by planning. There have been many objections, including one from the local MP, which have all been disregarded by planning and classed as insignificant. At the end of the day, it is a business being run where the owner wishes to make a profit on the backs of vulnerable children without a care for the community he has left. Planning seems to be too scared to turn down the request due to it going to appeal, which would involve high costs to the council, much easier to rubber stamp it. There must be a point when a property crosses the threshold and is not fit for purpose. 2 Osprey Close is not fit for purpose and should be refused on the grounds of inadequate parking as recommended by the SPD and Highway Code. The safety of residents and public using the roads and pavements in that area should be top of the list. This is a square peg trying to fit in a round hole. I would like to think that the councillors on this committee will act in a responsible and professional manner and refuse this application due to those reasons. These are valid reasons and common sense should prevail.
Okay, is that it? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can I ask, does anyone have any points of clarification they wish to seek? No, I just have one point, and it's maybe something more for the planning officers, just to clarify. You talked about SPDs. Can you just confirm SPDs are not statutory, but they're guidance-based for members of the committee?
Yep, so the SPD that the objector refers to is the council's transport, essentially the parking supplementary planning document. They are guidance documents. There are no hard and fast rules with parking provision. You have to take each application on its own merits. You have to consider the nature of the highway, the speed of the road, the impacts of any on-street parking. And we have had that confirmed in a number of planning appeal decisions that have been issued recently by the Planning Inspectorate. They are reminding us and committee members that the SPD guidance should be applied flexibly and on a case-by-case basis. So the fact that the scheme is substandard by 1 parking space is not, a green light necessarily to refuse an application. We have to consider all material planning considerations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That obviously can work vice versa, I'm guessing, as well.
Yeah, so if this scheme was, or this site was on a classified road with double yellow lines, I'm sure the officer report would be very different in terms of the substandard off-street parking provision that we've got here. But obviously you have an officer report there that has considered the nature of this particular site and this application.
Right, thank you for clarifying that. I'll go to our final speaker, that's the Ward Councillor, Councillor Julian Guttridge.
I thank all councillors and officers who attended the site visit at Osprey Close today and could foresee for themselves the problem with this proposed change of use from a residential dwelling to a children's care home. You could see the strength of feeling from the residents. 53 objections from 30 addresses, as well as an objection from Marcus Jones, our MP, and 4 objections with no addresses provided. Following the revised plan being submitted, a further 10 objections were received from 6 addresses, and a further 2 objections were received with no addresses provided. So you can see we are got a lot of objections, but many of these objections are parents and grandparents and great-grandparents and understand the problems with children and children's homes in the community. Like the residents, I have some major concerns on the change of use, parking or lack of parking on site. Item 3 in the agenda, page 20, impact on highway safety. The application shows 4 parking spaces, but this is incorrect, as only 2 can be used. The garage doesn't qualify because it's too small to meet the planning guidelines. The block paving, well, what can you say about the block paving? If you park on, park off, you've got to reverse off, and not forgetting the street light. So parking does not meet the SPD, supplementary planning document. I asked officers for clarification on this and was told that the SPD is for guidance only. So my question to the committee is, 1, what is your definition of the word guidance? 2, the committee must be careful with this application as it does not meet the SPD, supplementary planning document, and will set a precedent if passed for further applications. Many thanks for letting me address the committee as ward councillor, and I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability, and I hope you reject this application.
Have any points of clarification I'd like to see with Councillor Gutteridge? No? Okay. So we have a recommendation before us to grant planning permission subject to the conditions as printed in our agendas tonight. Obviously, to enable discussion and debate, we have to have a proposer and a seconder for this. Okay, so that enables us to move to discussion. So do I have a proposer for the sake of discussion? So Councillor Green, thank you. And do I have a second? Councillor Marker. Okay, so we will move to discussion. Before we do, just to let you know, you may have noticed that Maria Bailey is not joining us in person tonight. She is online, and I believe we also have somebody online from Warwickshire County Council's Highways Department, so that if there are any highways issues, hopefully we have somebody who can come back and clarify any of the points that you may have. Okay, so just obviously let us know if you do have a question for them, and they'll do their best to answer. Claire will be sort of substituting for Maria for most of it, but Maria is online should she be required. Okay, so I will open it up now for debate and discussion. So any members? Councillor Wilson.
Alongside Councillor Guttridge, I am a ward member for the area concerned. And again, like Councillor Guttridge, I only live around the corner from this site. So I am extremely familiar with the local area, having been brought up there since a little kid. So I'm going to say some things which the residents will find unpopular to begin with, because we have heard talk from our speakers about facts. So I also have to introduce some facts into this equation too, because we have to remember we have to take the kids out of the equation, because whatever reason they are there for, they are kids in care who need help and assistance. So to blame them or anything, we can't do. And I know that some, and I'm not saying that the current speakers have done this, but I have seen in the past and in this some saying, well, because they're kids in care, the crime rate is going to go up. Well, I'm sorry, I'm sure there are plenty of kids in Whitestone who are naughty who aren't in care. So I don't hold any truck with that. And to say this is about profit, yes it is, let's not shirk away from that, but everyone who submits a planning application, whether it be for an extension or whatever, there is an element of profit that goes in with that, because it will increase the value, or they hope it will increase the value of their house. It is also a fact that we have to judge these things according to what we call material considerations, or to put it in a layman's terms, the law. So what we want isn't necessarily in compliance with the law. And that is an unfortunate situation. As someone who's been on the planning committee for an awful long time now, I have felt that pain and been on the horns of that dilemma. And it is absolutely clear to me that this committee is going to be on the horns of a dilemma with this case, Chair. And it was mentioned as well that this is about money and the fact that the council won't go to appeal. We would be reckless with council taxpayers' money if we were to send a case to the planning inspector where we know we are going to lose. If we know we are going to lose that amount of money, £50,000, whatever, that is taxpayers' money that goes towards paying the services you want, your bins, your parks and open spaces, etc. However, I believe, genuinely, Chair, that there is an arguable case to put before the inspector in this instance, if the committee was minded to refuse. Firstly, I accept the point that the SPD is guidance, and you have to weigh that up accordingly on the balance of everything else you take into account with the application, because it is a balancing act, judging a lot of these things. But the very nature of what we are asking, or they are asking, sorry, Chair, for this house to be turned into, in my mind, makes the provision of that third parking space even more essential, because there are going to be more vehicular movements proposed going in and out of that close. So having somewhere with a third parking space, to me, for the nature of the business, and it is a business, whilst it is still residential, it is running it as a business, is necessary to ensure the smooth running of that establishment and that there is no detriment caused by this application to the existing residents. So I believe there is a case here to say that we should apply the SPD, bearing in mind it is guidance to say that we believe, given the circumstances of this proposed use, that we do need that third house, that third parking space. And I am also very conscious that this is a cul-de-sac, and it's not alone in that particular area, because some of the other cul-de-sacs around there as well don't have a pavement. To me, that makes it even more important that we're in highway safety, because you don't have that buffer with pedestrians on a pavement compared to the car. So you have got kids who will be there, who it is important to safeguard, even more so given that they will be acting in loco parentis, to make sure that we give as much buffer in as possible. Having no pavements there, to me, is a tick in the no column, Chair, I have to say. And it can be, having been down that close and walked it a number of times, it can be very tight when you've got cars in there. I've seen it myself. I've experienced it myself, Chair. So I think our colleagues at County have got it wrong. But I'm afraid I'm going to have to be level with the residents. If County don't back you up in terms of a planning objection, the inspector is unlikely to support this committee in refusing it on highway grounds. That's just me being honest with residents, having seen that a number of times. In the report, Chair, it references on page 19 that this site is located within a sustainable location in close proximity to nurseries, primary and secondary schools, bus stops, shops and parks. I'm afraid that I think our planning officers may have got it wrong in this instance. There is no secondary school within Whitestone area. There's no primary school within Whitestone, but it is nearby in Attleborough. The nearest secondary school is George Eliot in Councillor Shepherd's patch and in Councillor Harbison's patch, where more likely than not, people from Whitestone will drive to get the kids to school at George Eliot School. And when it comes to play in open spaces, in 2012, this council produced a document, which I still believe is current and up to date, showing that Whitestone is the most deprived in terms of play in open spaces. We have 2 play areas in the whole of Whitestone, Chair, one of which actually technically isn't in Whitestone. It is at Paul's Land. The other one is Crowhill Rec. They are not within easy walking distance of this site to the parks. Now, I appreciate that officers are probably going to come back and say, well, there are other families and other kids in that position who live in Whitestone. True. But in my mind, these kids who are going to be in that property, who are children in care, should be held to a higher standard in terms of what we provide to them, because they have been the most vulnerable in our society. They do need those facilities more on their doorstep, rather than having to walk or cycle miles, and it is miles in some cases, to these play and open space provision. The statement from the Minister, which is being relied upon as a material consideration, at page 21, they're quoting that these need to be the right homes in the right places with access to good schools and community support. I don't disagree with the Minister, but if I'm asked the question, is this the right home in the right place, I have to answer no, because it isn't for the particular needs of these children. And when I look at page 23, and I appreciate officers will say it is a standard form of wording, in terms of reasons for approval. And I've seen this hundreds of times. This is having regard to the pattern of existing development in the area. Well, I'm sorry, but there is no existing pattern of development of children's homes in Whitestone at all. Very little in Nuneaton, as it happens. And to say it would not materially harm the character or appearance of the area, I have to disagree. As the ward member chair, I do believe it would materially harm the character, not necessarily the appearance, because it will still look like a house on the outside, but it will materially harm the character. And the speakers are right. They are predominantly more elderly residents around that area. But if the committee is minded to approve, and I hope it doesn't, and I hope I've given it some food for thought as a local member, I would hope somewhere we can condition or enforce somewhere, although officers may tell me we can't, that the number of the duty manager should be provided to all residents in the area, so that if there is an issue, and I know it's happened in other places, that the number has been given to the residents in the area, so that if there are instances of disruption, that the residents, instead of having to go through a switchboard, they can go straight to the person in charge and say, "Oi, something's going wrong here, we need to pull it back." I'm not saying it will, but we know that there can be instances where that happens. Children are children. But those are my thoughts, Chair, and as it stands, I will not support the recommendation.
Okay, that Councillor Wilson said.
Just in response to Councillor Wilson's comments in relation to accessibility and proximity to facilities and services and open space, just a word of caution that obviously this existing, this site has a 5-bedroom property already, you know, that we could have 3 children accommodated in that existing dwelling, who would also need to go to school, access services and facilities with family. The differences between the two uses of this property are very similar. There's no requirement for us to set any higher standard in terms of proximity for cared for children as opposed to any other child. So just a word of caution in relation to that, because I think that would be quite a dangerous ground to resist an application on. And I think that's probably it from me on those comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other members? Sorry, Councillor Wilson, anything you want to come back on first, or are you okay with that, with what you just heard? There's nothing you want to come back on?
It's a matter of interpretation.
Yeah, okay. Do I have any other members? Councillor Cape.
I live in the area, but I did travel up on the site visit. I was driving my mum's disabled vehicle, just as a bit of background. I did intend to drive into Osprey Close to actually ascertain for myself how easy it would be. On looking at 5 o'clock, I went, I don't want to risk it. I didn't feel comfortable. So I drove further down the wider access main road and parked up on the left-hand side. When I left there, I still had to do a 3-point turn around another close, which once again made me feel slightly nervous. Maybe I'm overcautious. The point I'm making is that for me, we may have WCC saying it's okay, but as a driver up there, just as a Joe Public, I didn't feel comfortable.
The members. Councillor Hammersley.
As members, I mean, we have to have an open, non-biased, non-judgmental with this. We are not taking sides with anyone. But we have to look at the whole picture, and we also have to be guided by the professionals that do this day in and day out. This is what they do. And it's extremely difficult for us to object against the decisions that have been put and made by planning, which could be contentious, etc. So there is this guidance that we have to take, but I can understand with the locals all that they're saying. I don't live there. Maybe if I did, I could understand even further. With the parking appears to be the biggest issue, and the comings and goings. Children, we can't say they're all bad, because they're probably not. So to bring children into this picture, we don't want them there. That I have to put to one side. But the biggest issue appears to be with locals, the comings and goings with vehicles. And again, we have to be guided by the surveys that Warwick County Council does and undertakes, and the guidelines that they also have to adhere to, and they pass on to us as being on this committee to follow. And for us to go against their guidance is extremely difficult. We can, but it does make it difficult then if it should come back to council, given the reasons why. You've had some examples. I'm not sure at any one time, and I'm not sure if planning could tell me either, how many vehicles are likely to be there with staff and visitors at any one time. It is contentious with, is it 2 or is it 3 parking? But that is if there's no one else coming to visit, etc. And also, where would they park, which again has been spoken by Councillor Wilson and others. Is it safe? And the residents as well, is it safe? Again, we have to be guided by highways with what they say is and isn't acceptable, and for us to disagree is difficult, as you may understand. Ofsted will come into this, I'm sure, but I will be corrected to see if this place is suitable. So it even could, correct me if I'm wrong, Chair, or anyone else, could be refused if Ofsted say, no, this is not suitable. But again, I will have to be guided by the professionals in this. Lots of other things I've made notes on, and Mr. Councillor Wilson has brought them to the foresight, and if I could refer to some of them, if you just bear with me just for a moment. The one saying where it's really contentious with the locals, okay, we can see how contentious it is, but again, we have to give a good reason to say no, and we have to be, again, be guided. We're not professionals, but we have to be guided by the professionals for us to reach that decision, whichever way we should go. So, at this moment in time, it's a difficult one for me. I can be on the side of the residents. I can also be on the side, it's like running with the hare and the hounds. I can understand the feelings locally with parking, which appears to be the biggest issue, but also planning and highways work to the rules and the guidance that are set down by people which are also above them. So they also have to work to the guidelines in front of them. So it does really make it difficult. Thank you, Chair.
I'll go with Councillor Harbison and Councillor Smith and Councillor Green.
Can you hear me, Chair? Yeah? Wonderful. Okay. I'm taking it from the perspective of looking through the objections, because if there were no objections, then this would go through plain sailing. So that's how I'm going to do it. To me, there are two types, 2 variations of the objections. The first one, to me, when I always look at these things, is from the practical safety and day-to-day running operations of it. I don't live in that area, Osprey Close. However, serendipitously, not that long ago, someone was giving me a lift down that area and they turned down there by accident, had to turn around and come back out. So I've been down there, okay? Now, if we take it down the list, I've highlighted the ones that sort of say increased amount of cars impacting on safety and parking, effects relating to parking safety and staffing on neighbourhood properties, pathways, walkways, off-street parking and close creating issues, Lack of, no, leave that one. Limited access for emergency vehicles, that's one that I really did highlight. Lack of public transport in the area, which would lead obviously to more car use. You can't just go and walk. Concerns regarding agency personnel and level of supervision of young people. If people are coming and going, it's not like dedicated parents looking after children. Increased vulnerability of elderly residents, which is not down to malice, it will literally just be down to circumstance. Questions, reductions in proposed car activity, again this all ties back in. Concerns that vandalism could take place if property was unoccupied for a long period of time. Again, we've got issues where maybe 2 or 3 times in a week you've got the police having to go down there. If it gets set on fire, I know it sounds like a minor consideration, but all these things are going round. I always look ahead. Impact on pedestrian and driver safety and parking. Now, all of those, when you put those together, you've got a situation where if, God forbid, something happened down there and there was a lot of people parked up. Let's say it was Christmas and there's a bunch of people parked up there to visit friends, family, and an emergency vehicle can't get down there. That's where I'll go with that. Now, the second thing that I'm going to do is not to go against my glorious leader, but I am actually going to put people into the equation, because it's not just children, it's staff and residents as well. Having come from a care background my own self, I know how any type of care home works. People go there, they do work long hours, they've got a right to a break. People go out at silly o'clock for a fag and they'll ring their chap or their partner, whoever, and it wouldn't be fair on the staff to have to not do that, in my opinion, and it wouldn't be fair on the residents to, because when it's like you've referred to in a past OSP, when it's quiet and it's night, you hear everything. So you're going to hear all sorts of things going on. It sounds minor, but trust me when I say this. So as much as I agree, the last point being as well with the schools, etc., slightly selfish of me, 3 more children at George Eliot is 3 less people from Triton Road or Red Deeps, or children that won't necessarily have a place at George Eliot. That's just me being selfish. So I understand completely and agree with the sheer concept of it when you just put it there in front of somebody, but I've got to say I come down on the side of all of the issues that the residents have brought up. Some I don't agree with, but I haven't referred to those, so it's pointless. But I would have to say, due to the fact that I do support these services being absolutely necessary and, where appropriate, in a place that makes it as easy for the children as possible to have a normal life. And another thing as well, there hasn't been a lot of detail about whether it will be short-term, long-term residential mixed, and that will have an impact as well. So it would be with a heavy heart that I would have to come down on the side of not being able to support this, I'm afraid. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your patience.
So just on the last statement that you made there, it's not really a material planning consideration whether it's short or medium or long term. That's not something we should really be considering in our decision-making process. We're here to assess the material planning facts, if that makes sense. I appreciate, some emotion does come into this, and some lived experience does come into this as well. But I just wanted to sort of just come back on that point. Sorry, yeah.
But I would say that a factor such as that does affect the general plan, but
to the forefront,
okay.
Our planning consideration. Obviously, there may be lots of other planning considerations that you take into account, so please bear those in mind, okay? Because that's what we're here to decide on. There needs to be a sort of a consistency in what we do, not just on this decision, but on lots of other decisions in terms of how we view planning and the material facts. Councillor Smith.
Following on from your point, actually, that you've just made, looking down these 52 objections, and whilst I accept to the residents they're probably very valid to them, the vast majority are not material planning considerations. And we have to discount them on that point. What does stand out to me are the amount of objections about the parking situation. Like many of the committee, I attended the site visit earlier. We're talking about a shortfall on the SPD guidance of 1 parking space. There were 8 cars I added up that were there for that site visit. I would say 3 of those, I think, were parked in Osprey Close, and badly parked, might I say, that weren't acceptable. But that still left 5 other cars that parked perfectly adequately on the main road. There are no parking restrictions. I didn't see they were blocking anything or making anything difficult. So I have to say, I have to go with officers' recommendations, certainly on highways. And with the lack of a highways objection from Warwick County Council, we'd be very poorly placed to refuse this on that basis. So I'm still listening to all the objections, but I'm erring on the side of having to approve this, even against residents' wishes and the amount of objections we've got on that basis.
As always, I listen to the officer's statement, always very informative and well judged. But sometimes, as committee members, we have to bring our own experiences as a balance to that. That's what we're here for. And I agree with the comments from all the other committee members tonight. But one thing I will add is on the impact on residential amenity. I've been a council for Arbury 18 months now, and I get the odd complaint here and there. But over the last few weeks, I have been inundated about a property like this, which has changed from C3 to C2. And so I do not accept, as it says in the document, that it's unreasonable to assume that looked after children are any more noisy or disruptive than any other family. And I have and I'll just quote from a letter I received today, and it said, "The house continually emits unreasonable noise and bangs constantly." And he isn't just banging the things, he's banging things with force. The walls, the windows. He punches sides of a van parked in the drive, the conservatory, you name it. The noise goes on when we are lying in bed at night and trying to sleep. And I'm sat trying to work from home in peace. I'm constantly distracted by the noise emanated from this property. And it's something the carers clearly can't control, and it does make you question the suitability of the current arrangements. I do note the actual applicants aren't here, because I would have liked to ask them what measures would have been placed for if residents do have concerns, but they deem not to attend. So I just wanted to highlight this to members of the committee, that what an impact a seemingly couple of people added to a street. This street is very similar, actually, to Osprey Close. I can't do anything to help the people of this street, but I think I can tonight to help Osprey Close. Thank you.
Who wishes to speak on this? Okay, so I've got a few sort of things. So I was also on the site visit today. So I've also been several other times as well over the last week and a half to have a look. So I've gone at different times of day, in the morning, in the evening, because I wanted to have a look at the sort of the parking issue, because obviously that was one of the big sort of concerns that was raised. And on the different times that I've been, I haven't seen particularly any sort of really large issues. The only issue I could imagine being a problem is if somebody were to double park on both sides of the road, but it seems that all the residents either park on their driveways, or if they are parking on the road, they're all parked on the same side and they're quite far over as you're looking down the road on the left-hand side. So there was no kind of chicanes being made by vehicles to get through. So in terms of getting down then, I did drive down the road tonight. I know Councillor Cape said that he didn't want to risk it. I drove down there. There's a perfectly adequate turning circle at the end. You can turn around there without any difficulties. And I didn't feel it sort of challenging or restrictive. I'm sorry, so you don't have a right to say anything from the public gallery. So I didn't have any sort of issues with that. Yes, people were parked on the road, on the left-hand side as you look up the road. And again, also, there were other cars who were parked over the service area as well. So we're asking other people not to do something, but the existing residents are doing those things themselves. So they are parking on the roads, yet they are complaining about somebody else possibly doing it. They are parked over their own driveways onto the service area. And having spoken to somebody from Warwickshire County Council's Highway who was there this evening, they said that it wasn't an issue, particularly if somebody did park. There's no double yellows or restrictions like that. But if somebody did want to come and do work, they would just be asked to move the vehicle elsewhere. So there's not even that kind of protection. So although they perhaps shouldn't have built the block paving the way they did, over that, there's nothing really stopping them that I could sort of see for parking there. Also on the adjoining roads, again, I parked on an adjoining road. I didn't stay actually in Osprey Close. I parked on an adjoining road. I've never had an issue in terms of, I know Councillor Cape sort of said about doing a 3-point turn, etc. But there's a lot of roads within the borough that are like that. From particularly these 1960s, early 70s developments where you have to do that. And again, I've not particularly had any sort of issue with that. It's not a particularly fast road. People don't, from what I've seen, they certainly don't sort of seem to be speeding up and down. And I have gone at different times of the day. I have sat in my car, for 10, 15 minutes just to observe other traffic, just to get a feel for the place. And I didn't sort of have that issue. So regarding that concern, I didn't really see it as a concern. Secondly, I think, for me, I've got to look at this in terms of and try and take out the emotion from it. And looks really at the sort of the arguments. And there seems to be this kind of, we want to select who our neighbours are going to be. And I'm afraid none of us really do get a say in who our neighbours are going to be. Yes, we'd all like a certain type of neighbour, but there's a lot of assumptions being made about these children and what these children are going to be like, and a lot of it is very negative, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. I mean, Councillor Harbison, you referred to these children taking away spaces from other schools, and that may well be the case, but also they may also be children who are already from the catchment area. So children who would naturally be entitled to that. We talk about provision in terms of there not being adequate services, yet all of you have access to those services. And, I don't know whether you have complained to your own ward councillors about the lack of provision, but if they're good enough for you, surely they must also then be good enough for these residents as well, if and when they move into that accommodation. Equally, they will have carers who have access to vehicles. So I may assume that they would act loco in parentis, so they have the power of the parents, and they have to be held at least to that standard, if not possibly a higher standard in terms of how they look after these children. So I'm a teacher myself, have been for 20 years, and the point about well, they need to, sometimes these guys need to have a break, and who's supervising the children. I will tell you now, when I'm at school, if World War III would start kicking off outside my office and I'm having a cup of tea, I don't sort of carry on drinking my cup of tea thinking I'll go out in 10 minutes when my break time is over. I will put my cup of tea down and I will go straight out and I will deal with it, as will my colleagues. We don't hang around. Obviously, we can come back to our breaks, but an issue needs to be dealt with. So I think, we need to sort of like take into fact those considerations as well, that we're painting a very bleak picture here of who might be moving in, and not all looked after children are the same, and we do need to bear that in mind slightly. But I mean, getting back to my main point, it's we need to sort of go through, and I can understand the emotion. I can see it there on the piece of paper in front of me with all the objections, but as Councillor Smith said, I have to look at what is a material fact to this case. And I understand from the speakers, nobody likes it when somebody profits from a property. But Councillor Wilson also said, you know, every time anyone builds an extension, part of that is with one eye on increasing the value of our property. So maybe as residents, we've all done that to an extent. Maybe there is, but that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is, you know, we've all done it in terms of trying to raise and add value to our properties. I appreciate they're using this as a business venture, which is, yes, slightly different in terms, and I can understand, you know, there is a need for engagement. I would like to ask residents, officers, if there is a way, if we were to approve this, that we could ask for a condition in terms of contact for residents to have, where they could get directly through to the duty manager of the property if there was a problem, so that it could be dealt with hopefully in a speedy and a satisfactory way.
My professional view is that that would be an unreasonable condition. The development would require registration with Ofsted, and Ofsted will deal with the day-to-day compliance. You know, things they'll look at things like safeguarding provisions, finance, accommodation standards, whether a manager is in place of a suitable qualification, and the list goes on. It's slightly beyond our remit, but we obviously understand that they will need to pass those rigorous tests. Am I okay to just come back on a few other things that the councillors have said as well? Obviously, in terms of noise impacts, we've had one councillor raise some comments in, I think a letter was received relating to another C2 use in the borough. Just a reminder that the environmental protection team don't have any objections to this application, so that's obviously material. Whilst I understand that an existing C2 use is potentially, you know, having some problems at the moment, that to apply that to all future C2 applications moving forward would be unreasonable. Just like, you know, private market homes may also have statutory nuisance issues that we're currently dealing with as a council. The matters are very similar, and we can't apply a blanket approach to noise impacts, but obviously I appreciate you raising those at the meeting. Obviously, just to reiterate the chair's comments in terms of school places, the existing property is a 5-bedroom property. I don't think we can really take into consideration the fact that these cared for children will potentially replace you know, or use up school places. They have just the same right as people within this borough do. We can't accept any further comments from... Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, but you've had your say, thank you. I've tried to indulge you, but yeah, but the planning officer is entitled to put forward the council's case. You may not agree with it, but she's given you the courtesy of listening to what you've said. We now need to do the same for our planning officers.
Yeah, Chair, I don't know if we'll be able to continue with this level of interruption from...
I mean, I would ask you, please, I know I said it is emotional, but please, you know, we need to treat it one another with some courtesy and respect. And I know we've been great so far. Let's keep that going, please.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of obviously parking, I know councillors discussed parking again. Just a little note from me, obviously the existing property could turn into, for example, a HMO without obtaining planning permission for up to 6 individual or unrelated occupants, which will have, you know, their own parking impacts. And I think that's probably all I need to say on the councillor comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The final comment I would have made in terms of if we can't condition that, and we can't, I know Councillor Wilson said it, and I do think it's very sensible, and I hope that possibly as ward councillors, if it were to go ahead, and if assuming that we do pass it tonight, that maybe as ward councillors, something you can look to establish links with the property owner in terms of doing that. But residents can also kind of contact Ofsted as well. So if things aren't going well and they're not happy, you know, they can get in touch directly with Ofsted, which... Well, that's entirely within your rights to do that, sir. Do I have any other speakers on this matter? No? Okay, in that case, we will put it to the vote. So all those in favour of approving the proposal to grant permission? Okay, against? Abstentions? Okay, so that is approved. Thank you. It's entirely up to residents. If you've only come for this matter and you wish to leave, you're now free to do so. I'll pause the meeting for a minute or two to allow anyone that wishes to leave. If you want to stay for the remainder of the meeting, you are also more than welcome to do so. Okay, I think we're just having a slight comfort break, so apologies for anyone who's watching this at home. That's probably why we've been slightly delayed. So we'll just give it another minute for any members to come back, and then we'll start the second item. Okay, thank you and welcome back. We've just, apologies if you're watching this at home for the delay. We've just had a bit of a comfort break and just allowed residents for that first item to leave. So we're now ready to commence the second item of tonight's meeting. So I shall hand back to Karina, who will now present that second item.
Thank you, Chair. Item 2 seeks planning permission for the demolition of the existing building and the erection of 9 2- and 3-bedroom dwellings at the Lodge, School Walk, Nuneaton. This application is being reported to the Planning Applications Committee as more than 5 letters of objection have been received during the course of the statutory consultation period. The key issues to consider in the assessment of this application are the principle of the development, residential amenity impacts, visual amenity impacts, impact on highway safety and parking, ecology, open space and biodiversity, flood risk and drainage, and waste and refuse impacts. The Lodge is a substantial red brick building located on the corner of School Walk, Trinity Walk and Park Avenue. The historical use of the building has included light industrial manufacturing and more recently as an educational site. There are a mix of buildings on the site itself, including a tall 2-storey red brick building with a tiled gable roof. There is also a single-storey red brick bungalow with cladding to the gable. A flat roof building is also located to the rear of the site. To the side adjacent to 22 School Walk is a garden area, and the site itself appears to be vacant. The site is approximately half a metre higher than the level of the road, with a relatively low brick wall to the boundaries. To the front of the site is an area for car parking. 9 new dwellings are proposed to be erected. A row of 5 terrace properties will front onto Trinity Walk, and these are proposed to be set back from the road to allow for a garden. A pair of semi-detached dwellings are also proposed facing School Walk, and a further pair of semi-detached dwellings are proposed to face the junction of Trinity Walk and School Walk at a 45-degree angle, to which the respective front driveways will be off Trinity Walk and School Walk. Each dwelling will have a front garden, which will be able to accommodate between 1 to 2 off-street parking spaces, as well as a front garden and rear garden areas. The dwellings will be 2.5 storeys in height, with a bedroom within the roof space. The roofs will be gabled with pitch roof rear dormer windows to accommodate first floor bedrooms. In terms of the principle of residential development, policy DS3 of the Borough Plan 2019 states that development that falls within the settlement boundary should be approved. The proposed development is within the settlement boundary of Nuneaton, and as identified by policy DS2 of the Borough Plan 2019, Nuneaton has the primary role for housing. The site itself is well connected to a good range of local facilities and services that can be accessed by foot and other sustainable means of transport. As such, the site is considered to be in a sustainable location. This is considered to meet with the requirements of policies DS2 and DS3 of the Borough Plan, subject to there being a positive impact on amenity, the surrounding environment and local infrastructure. In addition, the site is a brownfield site, and paragraph 119 of the MPPF 2023 aims to promote the efficient use of brownfield land. It places emphasis on making as much use as possible of previously developed or brownfield land, if it is located within the existing urban settlement area. Overall, the application accords with the aims of the Borough Plan 2019 and the guidance set out within the MPPF in relation to the reuse of previously developed site, and the principle of residential development on this site is considered to be acceptable. With regard to the residential amenity impacts of the scheme, it should be noted that the scheme has been amended to reduce the number of proposed dwellings down from 10 to 9. The layout and design of the dwellings has also been amended following comments received by the planning case officer. The scheme has been assessed against the guidance set out within the Council's Sustainable Design and Construction SPD has been found to be compliant. No unacceptable residential amenity impacts are considered to arise to the occupants of number 22 School Walk or number 19 Trinity Walk. In terms of all of the surrounding residential properties, including those opposite the site, it is not considered that there will be any material harm to these properties or the occupants, given the separation distances involved, as well as there being existing development already located on the site. In terms of the impact on the proposed dwellings themselves, the dwellings will be 2.5 storeys with bedrooms within the roof space. All of the dwellings would comply with the internal space standards set nationally. Furthermore, the separation distances between the proposed properties also comply with the standards contained within the Council's Sustainable Design and Construction SPD. As such, the residential amenity impacts of the scheme are considered to be acceptable. In terms of design and visual impacts, the street scene within the vicinity of the site is mostly residential in nature. However, there is a mix of different types of dwellings in terms of their size, style, finish and age. The scheme as amended now proposes a total of 5 terrace dwellings which will front onto Trinity Walk. This has been reduced in scale from 6, which in turn has amended the internal arrangement and the external elevations of the dwellings. Visual features such as chimneys and eaves details were also added to all 9 of the proposed dwellings. The front dormer windows were removed. Mock Tudor cladding was added to the eaves to reflect the character of the existing building on site. It is considered that with such amendments, the visual amenity of the proposed dwellings is now in harmony with the mixed character of the surrounding area. Precise details of the external materials and finished ground and floor levels would be secured through the use of planning conditions. It is considered that the number of proposed dwellings is suitable and would not constitute overdevelopment. Furthermore, the design and visual impact of the scheme is considered to be acceptable and would be in accordance with the guidance set out within the MPPF 2023, the Borough Plan 2019 and the Council's supplementary planning document, Sustainable Design and Construction. Turning to highway safety, vehicular access would be taken from the proposed driveways serving each dwelling to and from Trinity Walk and School Walk. The County Highway Authority are satisfied with the proposed access arrangements. With regard to parking, the scheme as proposed only has the capacity to provide 2 off-street car parking spaces for the pair of semi-detached dwellings, which are located on the junction with Trinity Walk and School Walk. The remaining pair of semi-detached dwellings, as well as the block of 5 terrace properties, only have capacity for 1 off-street parking space each. The scheme is therefore substandard in terms of off-street parking provision. A parking survey has been carried out by the applicant, given the lack of off-street parking proposed. The results of the survey shows that there is sufficient on-street parking provision available to accommodate the extra vehicles from the proposed development not able to be parked on site. A condition is also recommended to ensure that additional parking to the front of properties does not take place and that appropriate soft landscaping is secured by a condition which will ensure that the development does not result in a vehicle-dominated frontage. The County Highway Authority have reviewed the proposal and, subject to conditions, they have no objection to the application on highway safety or parking grounds. In relation to the ecological impacts of the scheme, the application would involve the demolition of existing buildings. A preliminary roost assessment was requested and submitted. The findings of the assessment were that the buildings on site had low bat roosting suitability for crevice dwelling bat species. A presence and absence survey was also carried out, which confirmed that bat activity was generally low in the area. No bats were observed to emerge from or enter the buildings on site. Furthermore, no evidence of bats could be found within the buildings or the exterior. The County Council's ecologist has no objection to the application, subject to the imposition of a condition. In terms of existing trees and vegetation, the site features some scrub vegetation and low quality trees. There are no TPO trees within or adjacent to the site, nor is the site located within a conservation area. It's considered that, although the proposal will involve the removal of scrub and poor quality trees, the resultant development could provide improved landscaping for the site, which could improve the visual amenities of the area. A proposed landscaping scheme would also be secured through the use of a planning condition. On balance, it is not considered that the proposal would have a detrimental impact in terms of ecology and impacts upon existing trees and planting. With regard to flood risk, the site is located within Flood Zone 1, which is land at lowest risk of fluvial flooding. Development of the site is therefore acceptable with regard to fluvial flood risks, and the application of the sequential and exception test is therefore not required. In terms of surface water flood risk, the site appears to be at a very low risk of pluvial flooding, with a very small section to the west of the site at a low risk. The application proposes to dispose of surface water runoff via the main sewer, which is not considered to meet the requirements of the drainage hierarchy set out within the planning practice guidance. It's also noted that the applicant has not confirmed why the drainage hierarchy has not been followed in this instance. It is, however, considered that given the limited number of units proposed, the method of disposal of surface water is not of such fundamental concern to warrant refusal of the application. In terms of waste and refuse arrangements, the proposed semi-detached dwellings will have side access to their respective rear gardens, and as such it is considered that there is sufficient space for wheelie bins to be located within the rear gardens or side access accesses, which is acceptable as they will be in a position which is well ventilated as per the SPD requirements. However, the mid-terrace properties will not have any access to their rear gardens from the side elevations. As such, a separate bin storage point has been added to the proposal. The bin storage point will have space for bins associated with 3 of the mid-terrace properties and is located approximately 4.8 metres from the roadside in accordance with the distance requirements set out within the SPD. It is noted that the distance between the mid-terrace dwellings and the bin storage point is more than 25 metres and would require the occupants of the mid-terrace properties to access the bin collection point via the public highway. It is considered that this is not an ideal situation. However, such an arrangement would not be considered so harmful to warrant a refusal of the application on this basis alone. It is also considered that these are newly proposed dwellings. There is an element of buyer beware, and the future occupants of the dwellings should be aware of the bin arrangements prior to their purchase. The scheme would result in some conflict in terms of the quantum of off-street parking provision, excessive waste drag and carry distances relating to 3 properties, as well as surface water disposal method, which does not accord with the drainage hierarchy. However, on balance, the conflict identified with the relevant supplementary planning documents, the PPG and the advice set out within the Council's technical guidance for the provision of waste recycling is not considered to be sufficient to recommend a refusal of planning permission. As such, it is recommended that planning permission be granted, subject to the imposition of conditions as printed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So I have on my list 2 speakers. The first one is speaking objection is Helen Eccles, who I don't see in the chamber this evening. So I shall move on to the applicant, Mr. Richard Try. So, Mr. Try, you have your 3 minutes when you are ready.
The time this evening to consider this application. My architect and I have worked very hard to respond to the request of your officers and to develop a suitable scheme. We're very pleased that your officers have recommended approval to the proposal, and we wholeheartedly support this. The scheme will help to deliver 9 new houses in a very sustainable location within walking distance of the town centre of Attleborough and other nearby facilities. The scheme will help the council with its supply of housing and reduce future pressures on releasing greenfield sites. The houses would be developed on what is currently a brownfield site, which is more environmentally friendly and consistent with government planning advice. The design of the houses is similar to those already approved on Park Avenue, and we have tried to be sympathetic to the character of the area in terms of the scale of houses, how they front the street, and the overall design. We recognise that some neighbours are concerned about the new development, particularly cars and parking issues. The proposal is only for 9 houses, been reduced from 10. The amount of parking is similar to that on the recently developed scheme at Park Avenue. The site has previously had permission for 26 apartments, which would have resulted in a far greater number of vehicle movements as opposed to the 9 houses currently planned. County Highways have not objected to the proposal on highway grounds. We've listened to the council at all stages of the process and have amended the scheme several times to make sure it can be carried out without harm. We would therefore ask the members to support the recommendation and grant planning permission for the scheme. Thank you.
So, congratulations. So I'd like to ask any members, does anyone have any points of clarification which they would like to ask at this juncture? No? Okay, so in that case, we have a proposal to grant planning permission, as according to the schedule that we've got printed in front of us. Do I have a proposer and a second? So Councillor Smith, you have to propose, and Councillor Wilson as a second. So I'll open it up now for any members. Councillor Cape.
Borough. I haven't had any direct contact with the applicant or any of the objectors, and so therefore I've got no predetermination on this. I do, however, have some questions that I'd like clarification on. On the diagrams on page 41, the area to the rear of the properties, are those all gardens? And that follows on from one objection that I noticed on there, which says that garden land owned by neighbouring properties is actually part of the design. Could you explain what the garden use at the back is, and what this subjector was on about?
Page 41, the proposed layout includes rear gardens for all of the proposed properties. I don't think the scheme includes any other owned land that's owned by neighbours. If it did, for example, if there was an error in terms of the red line that we're not aware of at this point, then the developer would not be able to implement any planning permission that might be granted by the committee today. They would need to come in with an amended scheme that excludes any land that they don't own, and those issues can arise on any application, you know, errors that we don't spot, or the applicant, you know, or the architect, for example, makes an error, you know, a genuine error, but we're not aware of any errors on this scheme.
I'll just come back to the applicants as well. So, is there anything you wanted to add to that in answer to Councillor Cape's question?
Those boundaries are correct, yep.
Okay, if you've got more, fire them away, please.
Okay, you talked about the drag for waste, the off-street parking, the waste going into the sewers, etc., and that those weren't considered as being substantial. But in Scottish, we've got a phrase which is many a mickle makes a muckle. In other words, many small things which are kind of accepted can lead up to actually a major complication in the future. It also ties in with the fact that the previous planning applications that were granted for up to 26 apartments, which was noted, and I do think it's fantastic that the applicant has made consideration for the local area and redesigned, etc. But I just need to get this addressed for myself, that although it was made of that 26 were approved in the past, that was actually not completed due to a lack of 106 being signed. So they might have had approval, but they wouldn't agree to sign the 106 for it, if I'm reading this correctly. Also, the drop from 10 to 9, which means that there's not a trigger for that one social house that would be required. I just need some reassurance that this isn't cynical, that it's and what the actual planning considerations are to avoid another 9 or 10 houses being put on the previously designed site in future. In other words, is that impossible now?
The first question in terms of the cumulative conflict, you're right. Small levels of conflict added together can create a development that is of a poor design. We don't think that the conflict arising is significant enough to warrant a refusal, but obviously, you know, it's for members to decide that. In terms of the waste provision, it's the 3 mid-terrace properties that would essentially have to walk out of their front door with waste, walk along the public footpath and put waste in a bin storage area. So throughout the whole week, their bins would not be in their garden, essentially. And in terms of collection matters are fine. It's within 4.8 metres of the adopted highway, and that's, you know, sufficient for collection crews. Yes, parking is substandard. Again, highways have no objections, similar to the previous item. And so, you know, in terms of holding a refusal on that ground alone, when having regard to the fact that the applicants carried out a parking survey which demonstrates that on-street parking is acceptable, that would be also pretty difficult to resist. In terms of surface water disposal, yeah, that doesn't accord with the hierarchy. It should really be firstly via infiltration if the ground is capable of soaking water into the ground. The applicant hasn't carried out percolation tests to demonstrate that that isn't possible. Some sites, for example, if they're clay, you simply cannot infiltrate, and you have to then look at other sustainable means of disposal. So that is conflict, and obviously the committee would be within their rights to refuse on that basis. The recommendation is that we don't refuse on that basis, but you know, the decision is obviously there for you to make tonight. And forgive me, I've forgotten the last question.
Was to make sure that there would be no further agreed in previous planning permissions.
So yes, the previous scheme, it's not really material. It wasn't a planning permission. It didn't. There was a resolution, but we didn't have a section 106 signed. So, in my view, we shouldn't really attach too much emphasis to that. In any case, you know, even if you had a previous planning application that did have a Section 106 signed, if that scheme or the implementation of that approval has now lapsed, again, that's not a material planning consideration. We're now assessing on the basis of a new development plan, and, you know, we need to consider that. In terms of any other development above the 9, the site is essentially maxed out. You wouldn't be able to, you know, whilst the applicant could submit a planning application for more development, I'd struggle to see where they could put that, you know, would be supportable. Yes, the development has gone from 10 to 9. That's not necessarily something the applicant wanted to do to avoid paying Section 106 contributions. It was actually a request from officers in terms of the layout. So the applicant, you know, wanted 10 dwellings. We actually didn't want them to have, we weren't in a position to support 10 units. So in any case, even if they did come in and try and sneak in another one, we would consider that to be sort of phase 2 of that development. And at that point, we would get contributions for the entire development. It wouldn't be a case of, you know, that boat sailed. We would be saying to the applicant, actually, you're the same developer. It's essentially phase 2. You're therefore, you know, you have an obligation to meet the Section 106 request for the, you know, the full 10 unit scheme, if you like. But as I said, it's very unlikely that will happen anyway, given the layout and proposed development.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Councillor Cape. Thank you, Karina, for answering those. The next speaker I have is Councillor Smith.
There is some conflict on this, but I'm happy to go with officer's recommendation that it's not substantial enough reason to refuse it. Actually, in the whole, I quite like the application. We've got a high need for 2 and 3 bedroom homes, and it's good to see these coming forward on a brownfield site. It's good use of the site. We've already heard previous application for 26 apartments was approved on appeal, so that fixes the principle of residential use. There's no highways objection, so I can't see any problem there. The only thing I would ask, I know this isn't a conservation or heritage area, but there is an argument that it could potentially be down the road there. Some of the style of the housing is very similar to that on Manor Court Road, where there is a conservation area. So I see there's a condition reference materials approval. I'm wondering if we could make a note on that the materials used could be in keeping maybe with the school on the opposite side of the road, that very red brick appearance. So it sort of continues that look of the heritage feel of the area. Apart from that, I'm quite in support of the application.
Sir Wilson.
Supportive of the application. I think the current site currently shows its wear, shall we say. I think that's being polite. And I think that this would be an improvement on what we currently have there. I would support Councillor Smith's suggestion about trying to tighten up that condition so it is more reflective of the school. Actually, I was one of the final years to go to that school back in the mid-1990s, so the red brick is quite actually ingrained in my mind from all that time ago, and I think there is an opportunity to actually make it a complementary point on the street scene, that you've got the school on the one side, and then this, particularly on the corner bit of School Walk and Trinity Walk, of making that a bit of a feature for the area. So I think that would be quite nice to do. And going on from Councillor Cape's point and the response, I can see why, looking at this proposed layout, that 10 would max it out, and that comes to my point actually, that I'm minded to move an amendment to remove the permitted development rights of what would be 24, 26 and 28 School Walk, and if I'm getting the numbering system right, Chair, and 29 Trinity Walk, because looking at the size of the gardens and the orientation on page 41, the gardens do look very, very small, and it is a case of buyer beware, I get that, But if they were to have the permitted development rights still with them, I think that could be an encroachment too far, particularly for the neighbours. So to give them some protection and to give us a bit of control, I think I would move that amendment, Chair, just so that those four, from what the looks of it, where they have the smaller, more odd-shaped gardens where it might impact on others, just to give a bit of control for us and protection. And I don't think that would be unreasonable looking at what I can see on here, unless officers... I see you shaking no, but in case you can think of any reason I can't, Chair. But I would move that amendment.
First, if that's okay, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. 2 points. You mentioned strengthen the condition regarding the materials. I mean, the condition does refer to details to be submitted, and as officers we do look at the surrounding area and would encourage use of red brick to be in keeping, but we can strengthen the condition to include that reference. That's not a problem. And also in terms of the PD rights, yeah, I quite agree that those 4 plots we could take away PD rights for extensions and possibly outbuildings as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy with those.
Okay, thank you. So, following Councillor Wilson, my next speaker is Councillor Hammersley.
Yeah, and it is nice to hear that the developer has been liaising with the planning department for their views, etc., and taking their comments underhand. So most of my questions have been asked, and the one to do with the materials, with the roof tiles and bricks, that's already been asked, so I won't ask that one again. And the bin storage, this seems to be a little bit of, well, it's the way it's been worded. There is an element of buyer beware about the bin arrangements. It does sort of not sit too well that somebody purchasing the property, beware your bin is not next to your house, or beware it's down the street, or whatever. Whether that would sway anybody buying or not buying the property. But again, if that could be looked into. But apart from that, I mean, I'm happy with what I see, and 9 is good. I mean, if it was 10, it'd be 1 better. But again, 9 is good. So I have no reason to go against this. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mark, followed by Councillor Shepherd.
On the bins as well. It doesn't... On the page 41, when you put the... I don't know if you could put the diagram up. Where exactly are the bins going to be stored? Will there be separate bins for each of the households, or as they're all being stored together, will it be a communal bin for the 3? And what's to stop them if they're separate, creeping in front of the house so they bring it down? So are we able to do anything about that to stop that?
The bin store proposed will only serve the 3 mid-terrace buildings. I don't know if my cursor shows up on this. On the screen it doesn't. If you look on the screen now, there's a proposed site plan to the right hand side. Obviously you've got the run of 5 terrace buildings. On the side elevation of the terrace building to the sort of northeast, the bin store is located between that building or that dwelling and the 2 semi-detached ones on the corner. So it's fairly close to the highway, 4.8 metres. It would accommodate waste and recycling receptacles for 3 dwellings, so they're not sharing bins, they'd have their own bins. But yeah, of course, you know, like Councillor Hammersley says, it doesn't accord with the requirements. It would also not accord with building regs guidance, that they use the word should be located within 25 metres drag and carry, which this wouldn't be. But again, it's a case of there's a little bit of conflict there. Is it enough to justify a refusal of the entire application? And of course, they're new dwellings where buyers would be aware of that not ideal situation. And it's obviously down to the committee to decide whether, you think that's acceptable or not.
What's to stop them in 6 months' time or whatever after they've moved in to move those bins from there to the front because they don't want to hike down the road, which is, nobody's going to want to do that in the rain. But we don't want them out the front of the house. There's no provision for them. So is there anything that will prevent them from doing that?
That there isn't really. You'd hope that the occupants of the properties are not going to store their bins to the front of the house. That there isn't really any kind of enforcement that you'd be able to do as a council, other than going out on every bin collection day. It's probably quite unreasonable to do that, and it probably wouldn't be expedient enough either for the council's enforcement team to look at that issue. But it is a valid concern. The council's SPD talks about bins not being prominent on the street frontage, so you're quite right, that is something to consider. We can't attach a condition that says residents must use that bin store. It's there for them, as a facility, as part of the scheme, but the council, it would be beyond our remit to force them to do that under a condition.
Okay, any further comments, Councillor Markham?
If it was a communal bin for the three, then they wouldn't be able to move it outside their house because it'd be too big.
I take that point. It could be, one of the sort of large, more commercial bins on wheels. I don't really know if we'd look at doing that. I think, for residential properties, you'd expect them to have wheeled bins, their own personal bins. Obviously, for things like flats, you start getting into the realms of having, the larger bins that you sort of pull up and they're on wheels for collection. But I have no experience at this council of forcing which bins are provided to which resident under a planning application. It's probably sort of a little bit of a tip over into the waste team, to be honest.
I've got two other speakers, so I'm going to come to the first one, which is Councillor Sept, and I'll come back to you, Councillor Hammersley.
Councillor Markham's concern in terms of the bins, but I should imagine having a skip type bin there would cause more problems amongst the residents themselves than a single bin each would create, because I could see them saying, you've used more space, you put more stuff in this bin, so I think it caused more problems than it itself. But I do share the concerns. In terms of the trees, I would like the condition put in there about replanting any replacement trees, because it is in there, but actually there's no condition being put in around that. I think it's quite important. And in terms of the contract management plan, that we've had no details in terms of working hours, etc. I would hope that we're going to be quite firm in it. It's quite a small community around there, and I would hate to think that they're inconvenienced with long hours on a Sunday, deliveries too early, etc. So I hope when officers are looking at that plan that they put a lot of thought into the community that the development's getting built into. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Yes, please. In terms of the replanting of replacement trees, we can have a look at the wording of that landscaping condition. Obviously, we have to be mindful that the existing trees are of low quality and they could be felled at any time without any consent. But, on the other hand, we also want to make sure that the visual amenities of the street scene are improved by the development and that we get, suitable trees. The other thing to consider is there's not a lot of space on this site for, specimens that are going to grow to a significant height in terms of, root protection. They're probably going to be sort of suffering in terms of longevity and the fact that there's public footpaths and the actual foundations of the property. So we will consider that. Claire, are you happy for us to tweak that condition to sort of be more precise? But yeah, we do have to be careful in terms of the specimens that we approve. But yeah, I'll note your points. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hammersley.
Reason to go against this, but maybe with the developer being here and listening to just slightly polish this a little bit more with bins, and aesthetically, it's with the hard and soft landscaping just to make this that little better. If we leave these grey areas, you would like to think the residents within common sense should prevail, and they would like their aesthetic look about the place. But again, sometimes people don't care. But so if it could be polished, and if there could be provision to deal with just this little thing with the bins, good. If it can't, it can't. But again, if you can look at it, all to the good. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, please do, yeah.
Just to confirm then, if obviously the application we're considering tonight is the one that's on the screen and in the agenda and on the plans, if committee are saying that they're not happy with the waste and storage and collection requirements for those 3 properties, then we would need to defer the item so that the applicant can submit an amended layout. We can't do that any other way unless we attach a condition saying, notwithstanding the details submitted, an alternative provision would have to be made. The other thing is there is no alternative provision that would be acceptable for those 3 properties because there's not space, they physically don't have rear access. So just be mindful of, we have no mechanism. If you do resolve to grant planning permission tonight, there is no mechanism available for us to get the applicant to amend things, so just be aware of that.
Thank you for that advice. Councillor Hammersley, you wanted to come back?
Yes, I do take that in full what you're saying, and I do not want to slow down this or reject. It is just I can't demand anything. The seeds are there if it is available to do something on his head, but I won't reject it as the plan stands at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That Councillor Wilson proposed and that Councillor Smith seconded. So the amendment was then to strengthen the condition in terms of the materials used, so it kind of fits in more of the heritage feel of the area, so sort of like a red brick design that kind of looks more in keeping with the school. And then also the second part of that was to remove permitted development, I believe, into the future. Yeah, yes, if you wouldn't mind, yeah. I believe it was the 4 sort of corner house on the right-hand side.
Yeah,
is that right?
So it would be, if I've worked the numbers out, and I can give you this afterwards, Claire, if that would help. Yeah. But I think it is 24, 26 and 28 school walk. So the 3 going up, but not the one over the line into Trinity Walk. And then just 29 Trinity Walk.
So are those, can you just clarify, are those the ones as you're looking at it? So I can see where number 18, 20, 22, so it's the ones on the right-hand side of the illustration.
So the 3 up there, 24, 26 and 28 school walk. And then on Trinity Walk, working across from number 19, which is down there, I've assumed that it's 21, 23, 25, 27 and 29. 29 is the one that I'm suggesting that we remove the PD rights from, looking at the shape and location of the garden on there.
Yeah. Okay, so are all members happy with that they've identified those properties? Yeah, please, yeah.
I think I understand what Councillor Wilson's saying, but I think in terms of protecting future amenity, it will be useful, and I think that's what he has referred to, is to take PD rights away from that entire corner. So you can't really see it on my plan, but as you look at on the corner of School Walk and Trinity Walk, that block, a pair of semis there, and either side you've got your end of terrace and then the pair of semis to the south of that corner.
Yeah, I didn't suggest that one because the garden looked big enough, but if you're thinking that's more defensible, I'm happy with that, Chair. It was just trying to see, it's that borderline, isn't it, about what you could defend and what you couldn't.
And just to point out as well, the condition would read in terms of plot numbers, because at the moment these haven't been street named or numbered. So it would refer to the plot numbers on that particular plan. Okay.
just clarify on that in terms of which plots we're looking at, or we're all happy we know the plots that we're talking about? Okay, so I'm not getting anything coming back from anyone. So all those in favour of that amendment? Okay, and that is carried unanimously. So provided we pass that now on our next vote, then that will be written in as requested. So coming back now to the recommendation, we have a recommendation to approve this item. All those in favour? Again, that is unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. When you're ready, Karine, could we start item number 3?
Thank you, Chair. Item 3 seeks approval of reserve matters for the erection of a flexible Class E or cinema use at Plot 5 and a flexible Class E use at Plot 6 and hard and soft landscaping of the public realm area at the ex-co-op building site at Abbey Street, Nuneaton. It is an application seeking approval of reserve matters relating to Outline Planning Permission 037658. That application was a hybrid application consisting of a full application for a hotel and an outline application for a mixed-use town centre development comprising flexible uses for retail, leisure, restaurants and makerspace Class E, medical uses Class E, residential Class C3 and multi-storey and surface car park with associated means of access. Matters relating to layout, scale, appearance and landscaping are to be considered at this stage. Matters relating to access have been permitted under the outline consent. This application has been reported to Planning Applications Committee as it is a major application involving council-owned land. The key issues to consider in the assessment of the application are the principle of the development, visual and residential amenity, highway safety and accessibility, flood risk and drainage, heritage and archaeology, and ecology and biodiversity. The principle of the development has already been established through the approval of the outline permission. The outline planning permission parameters indicate that Plot 5 is to be used as a flexible space of between 1,895 and 2,545 square metres for Class E and or cinema uses, and that Plot 6 at between 1,785 square metres and 2,770 square metres will feature flexible Class E uses envisaged as leisure use. Use Class E relates to commercial, business and service uses. Please refer to page 79 of the agenda for information relating to which uses now fall within Use Class E following the changes to the Use Classes Order in 2020. To facilitate the approved uses, the buildings have been designed to be a blank canvas internally to provide suitable flexibility for operator fit-out. The minimum parameters indicated for the plots within the outline planning permission assumed a mezzanine level of around 70% of the ground floor area. The detailed proposals to Plot 5 do not seek a mezzanine, with a maximum 180 square metres mezzanine proposed for Plot 6 instead. As such, the overall floor space is 1,321 square metres for Plot 5 and 1,494 square metres for Plot 6. The buildings have been designed within the approved vertical and horizontal parameters. The approved parameters of the central plaza provide for a minimum of 2,075 square metres, and the proposed plaza is well within this provision. The scale of the buildings are reflective of the commercial nature of the area, with a traditional warehouse form at a 2-storey height featuring a pitch roof. The proposed scale of the plots 5 and 6, when read in the context of the hotel to the north, the multi-storey car park to the south, and the food hall building at Plot 1A to the east, will be appropriate when having regard to the wider site context. The bulk of elevations will be screened from primary public areas within the plaza. The buildings themselves will be largely screened from the ringway by the existing mature tree line along the western boundary of the site. The use of the multi-pitch roof ensures that the height of the buildings are kept to a minimum of under 9 metres to the eaves and under 10.5 metres to the ridge. The design and scale of both plots are considered appropriate for the existing and proposed surrounding built context. The buildings would feature a simple palette of modern high quality and low maintenance materials to include curtain wall systems and profiled metal cladding. Precise materials are to be agreed via a condition imposed upon the outline planning permission. The main area of public realm will act as a centrepiece to the site, contained by new buildings. The space will be designed to accommodate a variety of uses in order to facilitate small events, outdoor dining spaces, and seasonal activities. The space is also intended to provide a welcome area for passers-by with seating available. The proposed landscaping strategy is considered to be acceptable in principle. Full details of the landscaping scheme are, however, conditioned as part of the outline approval. In terms of the impact on neighbouring properties, the nearest properties would be over 60 metres away from the proposed buildings, with these distances also across the runway, and therefore it's not considered that their amenities would be significantly affected. In terms of the flats proposed at Plot 2 within the site itself, these are over 80 metres away from the buildings, which is also considered to be acceptable. The Council's environmental health team have been consulted and have no objections to the application. It should be noted that there are conditions on the outline permission which should secure details relating to noise, including details of all proposed plant and equipment. With regard to highway safety and parking, access has already been approved under the outline planning permission. With regard to parking, there is a condition imposed upon the outline permission that requires details of parking provision to be provided for each phase. Details will be provided to discharge this condition prior to the commencement of the development. Car parking will be provided within the multi-storey car park as per the approved outline permission and as required by that condition. A total of 45 surface car parking spaces, including 4 accessible spaces, are also proposed to the west of the plots, linking with parking forming part of the hotel to the north. Secure cycle parking spaces will also be provided within the multi-storey car park, which are subject to consideration under Planning Permission 039677. The County Highway Authority have no objection to the application, subject to conditions covering the surfacing, drainage and markings within the car parking areas and the positioning of bollards within the pedestrian areas. It is, however, considered that these details can be secured through the conditions imposed upon the outline permission, and therefore there is no need to include them on this reserved matters application. Bin collection points for plots 5 and 6 will be to the rear of the service road. The Council's waste and refuse team are satisfied with the proposed arrangement. The principles agreed at the outline application stage have been carried through this reserved matters application in relation to surface water drainage from these specific plots. The plots will outfall into the wider Abbey Street development. The County Council's flood risk management team have been consulted on this application and have no objection. The site adjoins the Nuneaton Town Centre conservation area and will have an impact upon the setting of this heritage asset, although plots 5 and 6 do not adjoin the conservation area itself. The plots are located furthest away from the conservation area towards the west of the application site, which would help to reduce the impact on the character and setting of the conservation area. It is, however, considered that plots 5 and 6 would lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of the conservation area. The harm has been balanced with the public benefits arising from the proposal in accordance with the guidance set out at paragraph 202 of the MPPF 2023. In this case, in terms of economic benefits, the proposal represents a major driver of investment in the future, which would contribute to improving the overall vibrancy of the town. It would also bring social benefits such as places to meet and opportunities for social interaction. The benefits are considered to outweigh the less than substantial harm arising to the conservation area in this particular case. Matters relating to archaeology have been addressed at the outline stage and through the use of planning conditions. In relation to ecology, these impacts have been assessed at the outline stage with relevant planning conditions imposed relating to lighting, further survey work being undertaken, landscaping and mitigation such as bat bricks. Landscape levels and layout are to be agreed via this reserved matters application, with materials and plant species to be agreed via the relevant outline planning conditions. Both the Council's Parks team and the Council's Tree Officer have no objection to the application. The Council's Parks team have, however, requested confirmation as to who will be responsible for the ongoing maintenance of trees and soft landscaping provided within the public realm areas, and who will be responsible for maintenance and repairs to street furniture. The agent for the application has confirmed that this will be maintained as part of the wider development on behalf of the Council, and the details will be assessed as required by Condition 27 of the outline permission. Boundary treatments and street furniture are matters to be controlled through Conditions 19 and 24 imposed upon the outline planning permission. In conclusion, the potential impacts of the proposed development in relation to residential amenity, visual amenity, highway safety, flood risk and drainage, heritage, archaeology, ecology, biodiversity have all been considered. The assessment has subsequently shown that there will be no adverse impacts in some instances. However, where potential adverse impacts have been identified, it would be possible to mitigate this through the use of planning conditions. The less than substantial harm arising to the nearby conservation area is considered to be outweighed by public benefits arising as a result of the development in this particular case. As such, it is recommended that this reserve matters application be granted, subject to the imposition of conditions as printed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We don't have any public speakers on this item, so I will ask for a proposer and a seconder so we can move to our discussion. So we have a recommendation to grant planning permission subject to conditions printed. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Shires, and a seconder, Councillor Markham. Thank you. So any members? Councillor Hammersley and then Councillor Shepherd.
I have no reason to go against this, but just a couple of things, and they're really personal to me with the look of the buildings. On the visual amenity, okay, it does say that the development are visually attractive as a result of good architecture and designed to reflect the existing and emerging site context. The proposed materials provide a crisp, contemporary architectural aesthetic that reflects the function of the buildings through the use of a limited palette of high-quality, low-maintenance materials. Now, this is all in the eye of the beholder. To me, they look like factory units, and I have said this in the past, but they will be functional for their needs. It's just that it looks like a factory unit, and that really is about the level of my liking for the look, loving what they're there for, but the look is not up my street. Thank you, Chair.
Opinion, isn't it? Councillor Shepherd.
Hammersley's, they do look like warehouses. I do wonder whether we're looking at any sort of colours on them on the outside so that they blend in either with the skyline or around, because I noticed we have put up a lot of warehouses over the last few months. Some by where I live, and to be honest, it sticks out like a sore thumb. So I'm just wondering whether we're looking at any ways of blending them in. But I am concerned about the application, because I'm not exactly quite sure, and I've been on this planning committee a long time, what I'm voting for. I don't know whether I'm voting for a warehouse type shed, or because it says flexible class A, which could be anything under the new government class flexible E, or a cinema. Now, I know we've said to the residents and promised the residents a cinema, so I hope that's what it's going to be. But I'm a bit of a quandary, because I think it's a little ambiguous in terms of what I'm supposed to be voting for as a planning member. Thank you, Chair.
Slightly for you, Councillor Shepherd.
Yep, so just to confirm, obviously this is a reserve matters application. The outline has already been approved, and the outline is what approved the uses. So we're no longer looking at approving any uses. We're looking at the buildings that will be used for those uses. So the reserve matters are layout, appearance, landscaping and scale. We're not looking at access or principal matters anymore, other than the fact that the scheme needs to accord with the parameters that were approved at outline, which they do. So matters in relation to whether it's a cinema, other uses within Class E are not relevant to the determination. That information's just been provided to the planning committee to remind you of what the relevant outline planning permission is. So just to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Shepherd had another point regarding the aesthetics in terms of the visuals of it. Is that something we can condition in terms of like the colours used, etc.?
Just to confirm, the outline planning permission has a condition that secures the details of all external materials. So they'd need to be submitted and agreed in writing through the discharge of condition process. We can't reattach that condition. It's already been attached at outline stage. So it would be unreasonable at this stage to do that. The time to have done that probably would have been the outline to maybe tweak that condition slightly. And just to sort of put everyone's mind at rest, obviously the scale of these buildings is not like, a warehouse that you'd see on a distribution site, for example. We're talking about sort of 10 metres high. Some dwellings can get up to sort of 8 metres. So to give you a bit of context in terms of how high these buildings will be in reality, it's not of the same scale of sort of a 50, 60 metre high B8 or B2 unit, for example. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Does that help to break it down a little bit for you?
Since the outline came, and I apologise for not remembering all the details within that document. So we'd agreed what was going to go in those buildings. So should that then have read then here, instead of or a cinema, should that have read and a cinema?
Is the answer to that. Again, the outline captured all the uses, so there is flexibility, and I think that the reason behind that is that there are no, or there's certainly not for these plots, end users for those buildings. So once those buildings are constructed, they'll then obviously be marketed, and it's not known at the moment who's going to occupy them, and that's for the same reasons why the plots internally, they don't have any set sort of dividing walls, for example, because the internal spaces are meant to be flexible, so any occupier could come in and use it within any use within use class E or as a cinema. So I hope that clarifies things.
Okay, any further questions, Councillor Shepherd, or points? No. Councillor Wilson.
Policy as the portfolio holder, but I'm actually here to discuss the planning issues, although if it does give Councillor Shepherd any reassurance, we are actually in active negotiations with other businesses to take on particular plots. But those are commercially sensitive, commercially sensitive, as I am sure she will appreciate from her time as a portfolio holder. But those have been ongoing. I think, just to give some reassurance in terms of planning terms, I think, because I can understand why people are thinking about these looking like big warehouses because there's large facades. But what we have to remember is that once someone is signed up, they will then, in all likelihood, then have to submit further planning applications for their livery and their illuminations, etc., which go with it, which we've seen no end of times in our planning lists, haven't we, when we get them every Tuesday. So I think that gives the space to actually do the design to go with them, so it won't look as imposing, shall we say, on the sight lines. The only other point I was going to pull up, Chair, and it is a minor point perhaps to some, but it's important to me, that it refers still to Rowan Ringway in the documents. That name went a good while ago now. It is Jubilee Way to honour our late Her Majesty the Queen, and I think we should be reflecting those as such in our official documentation, because it is no longer Rowan Ringway. It may be a case of copy and paste from a previous report and slight titivations to update, which I can appreciate, but can we just make sure it is accurate, because the pedant in me and the historian in me quite gets annoyed at those things. Thank you, Chair. Sorry.
Yeah, that's sort of malice or ill will, and I know it will be noted and acted upon in future documents. Do I have any others? Councillor Cape.
Yeah, it may be a small point, but just for the sake of clarity, there was one objector on page 48, Councillor Condacor, who in his objection maintains that these issues were repeatedly ignored. Can I just have reassurance that on page 51, when WCC Highways have said that they've got no objection, etc., that they have also therefore considered these factors and have said that there is no objection. So it has been actually addressed.
Yeah, the points that Councillor Condacor raised are issues which Highways would look at, so yes, they have been taken into account.
Okay, do I have any other speakers on this matter? Okay, I'm not seeing any indications, so in that case we'll move to vote. So all those in favour of granting permission? Against? Abstentions? Okay, so that is approved. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our final item of the evening.
Thank you, Chair. Item 4 relates to numbers 17 to 23 Abbey Street, Nuneaton, and seeks planning permission for the variation of Condition 2 of Planning Permission 038706 to show the full demolition of the warehouse building to the rear, changes to window and door alignments and finishes to all elevations, internal layout changes to floor plans, increased parapet height by 0.745 metres, alteration to roof plan and revised curtain walling to links. The application also seeks a variation of Condition 13 of the same planning permission to amend the trigger for when the details of the external plant, equipment and machinery are required to be submitted to the council, which would be prior to their installation as opposed to prior to any development taking place on site at all. For clarity, members should refer to the proposed demolition plan to understand the full demolition proposed. The site is situated within Nuneaton Town Centre and is bound to the north by Abbey Street, to the east by existing commercial development and Plot 2 of the outline approval, and the wider Abbey Street site. To the west is the remaining cooperative buildings, including the retained arcade, and to the south is land proposed as part of the public realm as per the outline approval. The site consists mainly of existing buildings fronting Abbey Street along the primary shopping frontage. The Abbey Street frontage features an Art Deco facade to the first and second floors, with three-storey part of the building situated between an area now demolished and the various commercial buildings, which collectively make up 23 Abbey Street. It is surrounded by a mixture of commercial uses, including a range of retail, restaurants and takeaways. The key issues to consider in the assessment of this application are the principle of development, visual and residential amenity, heritage and archaeology, and ecology and biodiversity impacts. The principle of the development has already been established by the previously approved application. And this application seeks to amend the plans which were approved under Condition 2 of the original permission. The application also seeks to vary Condition 3 so as to change the trigger point for the submission of details as mentioned earlier on. In terms of visual amenity, the changes proposed by this variation of condition application are as follows. Changes to window and door alignments and finishes to all elevations, internal layout changes to floor plans, increased parapet heights, alteration to roof plant, removal of 2.1 metre high plant overrun and replacement with increased parapet and smaller standalone plant sections, and amended curtain walling to links. These changes are considered to be minor and the aesthetics of the development will not be significantly altered to that that's previously been permitted. Windows, for example, where no longer possible because of internal changes, have been replaced with false windows, which is considered to be acceptable. A BREEAM rating of very good would also be achieved. Overall, the design and visual impacts of the scheme are considered to be acceptable. The application seeks to vary Condition 3 of the original planning permission so that development can begin on site before the details of the plant machinery are required to be submitted to the council for consideration. The proposed trigger point would ensure that prior to the installation of this plant equipment and machinery, the exact position and full details, including specification of noise attenuation measures and maintenance schedules, would be submitted to the council for consideration. The proposed variation to the trigger point is considered to be acceptable, given that the potential noise generated by such plant and equipment, as well as suitable mitigation measures, would need to be assessed in detail and approved in writing by the council before any such equipment and machinery is installed. The residential amenities of nearby residents would therefore be safeguarded by the proposed variation to Condition 13. Given the nature of the proposed changes, the Council's Parks team have confirmed that the changes proposed under this application will have no significant impact in terms of loss of ecology or biodiversity. Pages 62 to 63 of the agenda provide a detailed assessment of the heritage impacts of the scheme. The most notable element of the scheme relates to the loss of the existing warehouse building to the rear of the larger main buildings on site. The warehouse building is a non-designated heritage asset. Under the previous application, the shell of the building was proposed to mainly be retained and significant works proposed to make it usable. It is understood that the existing building is in a poor state of repair and that the degree of necessary remedial works became more apparent as the development and building and conversion works began. The structural changes required within the building are so extensive that its partial demolition, as previously approved, is no longer practical. As the proposal involves the complete demolition of the existing building, the scale of the harm to this heritage asset would be substantial. An assessment of the acceptability of the loss of the non-designated heritage asset has therefore been carried out in accordance with the requirements of Policy BE4 of the Borough Plan 2019 and the advice set out within the MPPF 2023. It is considered that the additional costs involved in the conversion of the building, the likely knock-on effects in terms of viability, and the public benefits of delivering the education use on the site are all relevant considerations to which weight should be attached. Overall, the planning officer considers that the total loss of the warehouse building is not so significant so as to warrant refusal of the scheme, especially when considering the poor prospects of retaining the building, its appearance, contribution to the public realm, and the fact that the end use is of significant benefit to the public and town in general. Overall, the principle of the development is considered to be acceptable, and the proposed variations of the two planning conditions are not considered to result in any unacceptable visual or residential impacts, nor would the scheme result in any unacceptable ecology, biodiversity or heritage impacts which are not capable of being outweighed. As such, it is recommended that planning permission be granted, subject to the imposition of conditions as printed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Once again, I don't have any public speakers on this item, so I would ask for a proposer and a seconder. So thank you, Councillor Cape. You're happy to propose. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Markham. Okay, I'll now open the floor for any members. Councillor Hamsley.
Yes, again, this is nothing that I'm going to vote against, other than its look. Again, on page 69. Shall we say? If you can get page 69 up, yeah. Anyway, we all got 69. I thought you were going to put it on the screen. Sorry. Well, either the top or the middle one. My point is, again, visually to the eye, square building, square windows. Look at the two buildings to the left of. At least there is some softening of the look to the front. There is some character within those. So are we keeping within the character of the street? It just looks too clinical, too square, no character. And again, it is just my personal view, and which may not be the others. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Just to bear in mind, though, committee, that the majority of that design has already been approved by an application which was considered back in January this year by committee. What this application is looking at and considering is slight changes to window alignment, so on various elevations of that building. Like, for example, you can see the two blue shaded areas. There's some of the changes that are proposed, but the bulk of the building, the shape of the windows, have all been approved under the original application 38706.
Yeah, Councillor Hammersley.
Yes, thank you for that. What's been approved. Again, it's just a personal visual look for the design of these architects. They need maybe a compass other than a T-square sometimes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
To bear in mind, if you actually do look up and down Abbey Street around there's a variety of different buildings dating from the late 19th all the way through to probably 1970s, 1980s. So there's a wide variety of architectural styles, some good, some not so good, I think is the polite phrase that we can use with some of them. And it is a mixture of styles, and as you can see, you've got the Edwardian style next door to what we've got going on. But if you actually, for example, go and look at where the hotel is being built, and I was up there the other day, what you saw in terms of the drawings actually does start to look a lot better in real life, because if you go down now, you can actually start to see them putting the red bricks around. They've actually started doing the facades around it, so it is starting to look different from what we saw originally on the screen with the pen and paper drawings compared to what we're actually getting. So I think it will look a lot more softer and pleasing on the eye when it comes forward, hopefully, if this is anything like that, because remember, this is an architect's drawing with black and white, more or less, isn't it, and not necessarily giving a true reflection of the rendering that we will get. But if you look at the rest of the street scene, I think it might actually be an improvement on what we've traditionally had there. I mean, even, there's one over the road which isn't ours, which is even burnt out, isn't it, which no one can do anything with because it's not in our ownership. Various different styles. So hopefully it will be somewhere of marrying the modern with the early 20th, late 19th centuries. So beauty's in the eye of the beholder, as Councillor Hammersley said, but I'm not as concerned as I might have been if I hadn't have seen what we've got coming up with the hotel. So I would encourage anyone to go up and have a look at the hotel, go up to the very end by where the cinema is, pop your head around the railings and have a look, because it's starting to look a bit better now.
To speak on this matter, I'm not seeing anyone Councillor Shepherd.
Who looks at it and we decide how we feel about certain buildings, but in terms of the warehouse, as a lot of the residents of this borough will have worked there, are we taking photographs of it so that we can keep hold of them in terms of heritage listings? Because it's a shame when, you know, somebody I used to work at to a younger person that actually there's nothing for them to reference it to.
To come back on that, or whether there's any portfolio holders who might want to come on back on that. Councillor Wilson.
Could, and where it was safe, we have taken photos. And I know before the demolition a few years ago, when I was in opposition, we were offered the opportunity to go around and take photos, and the Nuneaton Memories and Co have also been round and taken photos. But part of the problem from memory was that some areas of the site really weren't that safe with what was in there because they've been so old and not maintained by the co-op. So there have been a number of photos taken, myself included. I'm happy to donate them to anyone, but it's not really a material planning consideration. But it is nice where we can to preserve the heritage.
Yes, I know Councillor Hammersley would probably like a more classically designed Nuneaton and Bedworth, maybe lots of marble and I'm not quite sure what, but yeah, I think it's important that we do preserve our heritage for posterity. So yes, it's not a planning consideration, as you quite rightly say, but I think yes, it's nice if we can do that. Then it's great that photos are already in existence of that, and obviously that has to be balanced with the safety concerns of the site at the moment. We want to endanger anybody for a sake of a photograph or two. So I'm not seeing any other speakers, so we'll move to vote. So all those in favour? Okay, that is unanimous. So we don't have any further items for this evening, so thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you to all the members of the public and all our speakers who joined us earlier on this evening. Okay, this meeting is now closed.